Hi everyone, my name is Sanika and I am a newly graduated naturopathic physician here in Washington State. And I just wanted to make this video to help even just a few students out as they prepare for their NPLEX 2 exams. So for those of you not familiar, NPLEX 2 is our licensing exams that we take to become licensed naturopathic physicians here in the US. I was in this position not too long ago. I took my boards back in August, found out I passed at the end of September, and here we are now. So I just wanted to make this video to kind of share what things worked for me, what things didn't work for me, what things I probably wouldn't do again, what resources I used, how much those resources were, and a little bit kind of just about the exam itself. So yeah, let's get into it. First things first, I will say that the exam itself is, for me, it was 3 days long. So this will differ a little bit based on which state you live in and which state you're trying to practice in. So for me, being in Washington State, I have to take a mandatory elective exam, which is the minor office procedures / the derm exam, and that is required to be licensed here in Washington State. And then I also took the pharmacology elective exam that wasn't required, but I figured why not take it down the road? Maybe I'll need it to practice in a different state. So those were the two exams that I took. So the structure of the exam is in the mornings, you'll come in, everyone will come in and do the core piece of the exam. So that's kind of everything you need to know as far as the conditions, the modalities, that's the core piece. And then in the afternoon, you'll come back, you'll have your lunch break, and then the people that are taking the elective exams will come back in the afternoon. So not all of my cohort mates would come back in the afternoon. It just kind of depends on which exams you sign up for. So for me, it was a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think you would start around 8 a.m. and then you would finish, if you took the elective exams, you would finish around 3. So they're busy days. They're not fun days by any means. But that's a little bit about the structure of the exam. So as far as kind of the routine itself goes, I will say that maybe you'll hear mixed reviews. I think a lot of the times it goes, 50-50. Some people will say you definitely have to start studying your spring quarter. Other people will say, nope, that's way too much time. You don't need that much time. Just start studying the few weeks before the exam itself. So when I tell you that I was beyond burnt out from this 4th year, the thought of studying for another exam, the thought of completing another assignment, everything just seemed so exhausting to me that studying during the spring quarter just didn't happen. I ended up studying about 4, almost 5 weeks leading up to the exam. We graduated on a Monday. I took that whole week off, and then I started studying the following Monday. So for me, that week that I took off was to celebrate graduating, being with friends and family, taking a little bit of a breather, and then honestly mentally preparing myself for the studying that I was about to do. You don't take a lot of exams in your last quarter of school. And so for me, I just kind of lost touch with sitting myself down and studying and being diligent about an exam, especially a big one like this. So a lot of that week was relaxing, but also getting ready, knowing what my routine was going to look like, and preparing myself for that. So I will say, I think the single most important thing that you can take away from this video is that sticking to a routine is probably going to be the best idea for you. And not just any routine, but a routine that you've done before and that has worked for you. I don't think this is a time for you to explore and try something new, especially if you're starting, like I said, like in July, you're just practicing or you're just planning on studying in July. If you're doing spring quarter, sure, I think experiment, see what things stick, see what things work for you. But for me, I didn't do that. So I had 4 weeks to nail down my studying and know the material. I didn't really have time to play around with a new study routine or trying to wake up at this time instead of this time, or trying this, studying this way today as opposed to this way. And so I think it's really important that you find a routine that has worked for you in the past and you stick with it. The other thing I will say is really hone in on prioritizing work-life balance. To be super straight up with you, I was horrible at this in med school. I did not prioritize myself during med school. I just didn't know how to do that work-life balance. I found myself not taking care of myself as much as I should have. And like I said, I was really burnt out this year. So I knew something had to change if I was going to be successful and pass this exam. So I told myself I have to prioritize myself just as much as I'm prioritizing this exam this summer. So for me, that was about taking breaks and seeing friends, celebrating my birthday, being with family, going on trips, like doing things that still um, made me happy. And it wasn't just about being inside all day long studying for an exam during the summer, during peak summer. So I would say those two things are really important. Find a routine that has worked for you in the past and stick with it. And then prioritize yourself just as much as you're prioritizing this exam. So I will say that my routine itself, I studied for about 7 hours a day. It was Monday through Saturday. Sundays I took off to just rest. But Monday through Saturday, I studied. I probably started around 8, 9 a.m. and then ended around 4 p.m. So, and then I had like an hour lunch in between. So those were kind of the study routines. And for me, I think you at this point you probably know if if you're an early riser, if you're a night owl, what times of day you work best in. So I don't really need to talk too much about waking up at this time is going to be your best option kind of a thing. You know what works best for you. But my point is I got in about 7, maybe 8 hours of studying a day. And I think that was really it was a lot, but it was I think needed for me. The other thing I will say is I was very fortunate that this is the only thing that I really had going on. With NPLEX 1, I took that at the end of my first 2 years of school. And that was also during the summer. You have classes, you have clinic, you have your everyday routine, plus this whole other exam that you need to squeeze in time for. With NPLEX 2, I this was my only job this summer was to study, and I was very fortunate with that. A lot of my friends and my cohort mates, they have families, they have children, they have other responsibilities that I recognize that this was all I had to do. Sorry about my dog. And that was really great for me, but it was also a lot to just spend all day studying. So I think it's important, like I said, to prioritize yourself as well. So, to talk about resources next, there is so much information out there, and there are so many resources out there that you can use for this exam, which is great. But this like plethora of information just makes you feel overwhelmed. You don't know where to start, you don't know what to buy, you don't know if all of these expensive things are even worth it. So, my recommendation to you is two things. Number one, find a textbook, find one book that you can rely on that you like. I think maybe take the time in spring quarter to explore the resources. Maybe like flip through them, ask, upperclassmen for theirs, see what textbook you like the most. And then the other thing is buy one like online resource, whether that's like a question bank, whether that's like a study package, like Pass NPLEX, for example. Those two things, buy a textbook and buy one study resource, like an online resource. For me, I used this NPLEX 2 core knowledge book. And this, I believe, was $150 last year when I bought it. And I loved it. I think it was a really great resource for kind of encompassing all the things we're expected to know on the exam. It's not super detailed, it's not super heavy, but it's concise. Like it's comprehensive, but also concise at the same time. It tells you what you need to know, and it does it in a very straightforward way. The other thing I will say is the best, like biggest resource that you need is the NPLEX 2 study guide that NABNY gives you once you sign up for the exam. So it's the PDF version. Print that out, make sure that's your best friend. That study guide will tell you exactly what you need to know on this exam. It'll tell you what conditions you're expected to know, what pharmaceuticals, bot med, homeopathy, phys med, nutrition, all of that. All of that is on this study guide. And I'll talk about it later, but that's basically what I based my entire like day-to-day studying off of, was that study guide. So the next thing I will say is a couple other resources. Wild Brilliance and Board Vitals were the two question banks that I used. I think there's a few options. Those are kind of the main, like the most popular options. Board Vitals is a really great resource. The questions are really straightforward. It's, if you know the material, you'll get the question right, kind of a thing. I believe it's around $120, $130. They have sales all the time, so maybe look out for one of those sales, and they have like a 1 month, 30-day subscription that you can buy, which is what I did. So Board Vital is really straightforward. Wild Brilliance, the other question bank, those questions are really challenging. They're really hard. And I don't think I'm the only one who thinks this, but you're going to see things way out of left field. You're going to see things that you've never learned before, that you've never heard of before, and it's going to be kind of discouraging. You know, I was questioning my own confidence as a student, as a medical student, as a soon-to-be doctor. So those questions were really discouraging, but I will say that those are very similar to what you're going to see on the actual exam. Those types of questions, the ones that are just so challenging that you have no clue what they're even talking about, those are the types of questions that you're going to see on NPLEX. And this is not meant to scare you. This is just meant to maybe bring some peace of mind that those questions are hard. I promise you, you're not the only one that thinks that. Number two, any person you talk to that's taken these exams is not going to say that this was an easy exam. You do not walk away with this confidence after you take this exam of, oh, I nailed that, or oh, I got that. You feel really discouraged after taking these exams because these questions are hard. They put things on there that you probably don't need to know, and you're probably never going to need to know. And Wild Brilliance, I think, does a really good job of prepping you for that and familiarizing yourself with the types of questions that you will see on the exam. So last couple things about resources. The Wild Brilliance flashcards, I would say they're really good flashcards to have all of the information for that one thing, but they did not help me actually study for the exam. I think if I were to go back and do this differently, I probably wouldn't purchase them. I think I'm not one to be a big flashcard studier to begin with. So I think Quizlet has helped so much more than those flashcards would have to like do really quick recall, like front back, knowing what the term is, what the definition is, types of things. But the Wild Brilliance flashcards, it's just like one term and then just like so much information on the back of the card that it just makes it so hard for you to memorize that information in a flashcard manner. So if you take that info and turn it into a Quizlet, then I think that's great. But for me, I found myself buying those flashcards and then I used them maybe the first week and then I just kind of felt overwhelmed and stopped using them. And then the last resource I will say that I used was this audiobook that I found on Amazon that's put out by a pharmacist who basically goes through and talks you through the 100 most common pharmaceuticals in the US. And for us as naturopaths, we don't really have much, not experience, but just like we don't handle a lot of the really hard medications that we're supposed to know on this exam. We don't really see it in our day-to-day practice, even in, being a student clinician. And so for me, pharm was really challenging. And even just like knowing how to pronounce these drugs and knowing the information that we're expected to know was really good to hear and play on repeat. That audiobook, every time I got in the car to drive somewhere, every time I went on a walk, on the treadmill, things like that, I was playing that audiobook. And it was just really good to hear that repetition and hear that information about the drugs itself. So that is the resources I used. So this is the NPLEX 2 study guide. This is what I mentioned that they will give you in an email once you register for the exam. I printed this out, I hole punched it, and I basically just like put it in a binder and took it everywhere with me. So this thing is like 85 pages long. I'm not going to get into all the details about it, but I did want to show you the conditions piece. So this is the core clinical science exam topic. So these are all the conditions that you are expected to know well in order to do well on this exam. So it's broken into like, not alphabetized, but like alphabetically, A through, I want to say Q, P, of all of the systems. And so for blood and lymph system, for example, you'll see a percentage next to it. That percentage basically just means this is going to be covered on the exam this heavily or not this heavily. There's, I think skin and nails is like 3%. So again, you're not going to need to know every little thing about all of these conditions. However, skin and nails, even though it's 3% on the actual core piece, you are going to need to know a lot more about these specific conditions for the minor office procedures exam if you're in the state of Washington. So that's just a little tidbit. But do what you will with that information. The percentages, focus more on the ones that are higher percentages. So for the conditions themselves, what I did was the purple core knowledge book that I showed you. That aligns really well with this study guide. And what I mean by that is in the blood and lymph system section, they'll start off with the cancers. Then they'll go to the infections next. Then they'll do the lymph disorders. Then they'll do the red cell disorders. So it goes in order with this study guide, which really helps, and it makes my organized mind just happy. And so what I did was basically every day I would do one system in the morning and one system in the afternoon. And I would open the book to that system and I would read. I would read that entire section, go condition by condition, and read them and highlight. So I would highlight things that I don't know very well, I don't remember, things that aren't in my brain quite yet, things I just still need a little bit more refresher on. And so I basically just highlighted all the things. So I would read a whole section, or I guess 2 sections in a day, one in the morning, one in the evening. And then the other thing, sorry, I forgot to mention, was when I first got this study guide, I copied and pasted this whole condition section into a separate Google Doc. So I became, that like Google Doc became my actual like built out study guide. So, sorry, going back to the highlighting, I would highlight and then I would type out the things that I had highlighted in my study guide. So I'll show you this doc. Like I said, it's organized on the left by all the document tabs, by all the systems, and then within each system, for the cancers, for example, under leukemia, CLL, these were the things that I still wanted to remember, wanted to make sure I kept in my brain, you know, all the information about lymphomas. So this was kind of what I did. I just built out the study guide. This is almost, 100 pages. So it was a lot, but this was kind of my phase 1 of my study routine. So A through P took me, I want to say, about 10 days. So I'll show you my Google Calendar next. This looks insane, but just bear with me. So what I did was, like I said, I would break it up, and I just took that NABNY study guide PDF, and I just said, we're going to do a system in the morning, we're going to do a system in the afternoon, about 3 hours each, and just keep going. So it took me, let's see, I started on a Tuesday, and the following week I would end on the Friday. So Tuesday to Friday, that's how long it took me to finish the entirety of the A through P. So I was able to kind of go through all the conditions, I want to say like twice or almost 3 times between my study period. And so, yeah, I kind of left bot med, homeopathy, pharm for the evening times. I wrote 5 to 6, but it was pretty loose. I would do it with the conditions themselves here and there. And then I would do some isolated like Quizlet or flashcard time in the evenings, and then as well as the weekend. I wrote here that I would do things on Sunday, but I really didn't do anything on Sundays. That was my rest day. So that is kind of my Google Calendar. So going back to the, I guess, study routine, this was my phase 1, which took me into about 2.5 weeks of, I would say about 3 weeks of doing the highlighting and then typing it out and building that study guide. The way I study best is by writing things out. That is what helps me retain the material the best. And so in med school, my best friend became my notability. So what I did was I actually took that study guide, that Google Doc, and I started writing out and made little mini study guides, written study guides. So you can see on the left, I made all of these little system like note guides basically. So for blood and lymph, since we were talking about that, I have all the conditions, and then I have really brief notes under each of them. This is after, 2.5 weeks of me going through the material, rereading it. I would read that study guide like every night basically before I went to bed, or at least reread the conditions that I had gone over that day. And so I basically just wrote out all the things that I still really need to know, still don't know, and things that are really important. Then I would take it a step further. Let's see, I'll show you cardio, for example. So conditions, and then below that, I would write out all the drugs, anything like mnemonics, anything I wanted to remember about the medications, and then I would do the herbs. So for each system, I basically just wrote out like a comprehensive, but also very brief, like just bullet point, single word type notes on the conditions, on the pharmaceuticals, and the botanical medicine. So I did this for every system, and this is kind of what helped me the best. So this is gastro, GI, conditions, the medications, and the botanical medicine. Let's see if there's anything else. And then homeopathy, I just made like a tiny little study guide for it, but that was based on like Quizlet, and I kind of just would reread this, rewrite over and over again. So that's essentially how I studied for this 5-week period. I'm going to stop screen recording now. So that's essentially all I have for you guys in this video. So I hope it was helpful. It is a scary exam. It is a scary time. Things are wrapping up. Things are feeling super overwhelming. This is kind of just the last step, last leg of this tour, of this journey. But I wish you guys all the best of luck. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Always shoot me a message. I'll leave my social media down below. And yeah, let me know if this video helped or not. Thanks.